Why does Russia want to control Ukraine, and why did it invade Crimea? To get to the answer, first we need to understand the history of Ukraine-Russia relationship. The relationship between Ukraine and Russia has been strained since the collapse of the Soviet Union. In the past decade, it had gotten worse. Let's have an overview of the history of Ukraine. It all started with the Revolution of 1917. It resulted in the end of monarchy, along with the execution of Tsar Nicholas II. The success of the Russian Revolution led to the establishment of Soviet Union, where communists came in power. Ukraine remained independent. Between 1917 and 1920, this period is extremely chaotic. Several entities in Ukraine were fighting to get the power. In 1922, Ukraine was forcefully absorbed in the Soviet Union by signing the founding document of the USSR. With its fertile land and grain production, Ukraine was known as the breadbasket of USSR. It was self-sufficient in the production of grain and food. When Joseph Stalin came in power, he introduced several reforms in Soviet Union, including the collectivization of agriculture. Stalin was the chief architect of Holodomor, which means death by starvation. Holodomor was a state-sponsored famine created by Joseph Stalin's government. Crops were seized along with pet animals by the Red Army, resulting in the starvation and death up to 5 million Ukrainians. Soviet Union economy was badly affected during the Soviet-Afghan War. This resulted in the collapse of Soviet Union by the end of 1991. On the same year, Ukraine declared its independence. Moscow had stationed roughly 5,000 nuclear arms in Ukraine due to its geographical importance. When it got its independence, it inherited all those nuclear weapons, which makes it the third most powerful nuclear nation on Earth. Ukraine economy was on decline and was seen as the sick man of Europe, desperate to put their economy back on track and to get the foreign aid. Ukraine decided to give up its inherited nuclear weapon. On 23rd of May 1992, Ukraine signed the treaty called Lisbon Protocol and agreed to full disarmament of its nuclear weapons in exchange for economic support and security assurances from the United States and Russia. After signing of the treaty, United States doubled their economic aid to $310 million in 1994. Russian forces invaded Crimea back in 2014. It then held a controversial referendum on the status of Crimea to formally annex the peninsula, which was condemned by the international community. Russia covers a total of 17.1 million square kilometers and spanning over 11 time zones. Despite its vast size and coastlines, it has very few warm water ports. Russia sees the port of Sevastopol in Crimea as a key naval base, which provides Russia access to the Black Sea, Mediterranean, and beyond. Crimea also holds large deposits of hydrocarbon resources. When Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, its western territory broke into independent states, including Ukraine, which creates the buffer limit between Russia and Western Europe. By the late 90s, most of them joined European Union. By invading Ukraine, Putin destabilized the region and put a stop to those countries from joining the NATO. After the invasion of Crimean Peninsula, sanctions were imposed on Russia by the European Union and United States. Russia was kicked out of G8 and NATO suspends its cooperation with Moscow. Russia starts mobilizing thousands of troops and military equipment on Ukraine border somewhere between March and April 2021. Russia's military buildup triggered an international crisis due to concerns over a potential invasion. American satellite imagery confirms movements of missiles and heavy weaponry. Russia had deployed 100,000 troops on Ukraine border by February 2022. The crisis was described by many analysts as one of the most intense since Cold War, and another sign of World War III. Russian forces invade Ukraine on 24th of February 2022. Invasion has caused Europe's fastest-growing refugee crisis since World War II. Russia's original goal was to overthrow the government of Ukrainian President Zelensky and end its will to join the Western Defensive Alliance, NATO. Since the start of the invasion, Russian forces met with severe resistance. After months into the invasion and several setbacks, Russia abandons the idea to conquer the capital and turns its ambitions to Ukraine's east and south, the Donbas region. More than 75% of the area is already seized by Russian forces. Ukraine, on the other hand, despite receiving tons of military aid from its Western allies and NATO, it seems helpless in the current situation and failed to push back the Russians. Russian forces are still advancing in the Donbas region. NATO has increased exponentially, specifically in the post-Soviet Western territory. Putin, ahead of war, accused NATO alliance, stating that it has only one goal, and that is to destabilize Russia and ultimately destroy it. He demanded that NATO should turn back the clock and go back to where it was in 1997. He demanded NATO to reverse its expansion, remove its forces and military infrastructure from member states that joined the alliance from 1997, and not to deploy strike weapons near Russia's borders. The United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution condemning the invasion and demanding a full withdrawal of Russian forces. International Court of Justice ordered Russia to suspend military operations. As of May 2022, more than 400 multinational companies withdrew their services and suspended their operation in Russia. Netflix suspended all services and stopped providing new subscriptions. Apple halts all their product sales. Amazon stopped providing services. United States and its Western allied countries imposed on Russia that Russia can no longer trade in US dollar, British pound, and euro. Russian banks can no longer use SWIFT code system. SWIFT code is an international banking system which is used to identify a specific bank during an international transaction. Russia issued a warning to the Western countries over the sanction and issued a statement that whichever countries support the sanction will be considered as an act of war against Russia. Has Ukraine made a mistake giving up their inherited nuclear weapons? Let us know in the comments.